Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Guys Who Stare at Stats. I'm Cade Kennedy with you alongside Andrew Santangelo. Andrew, I know I said it last time we did an episode, which what feels like 3 months ago. It's been a while, but we're finally back. We were able to both be in the same room to talk a little bit of sports. College football, Week 14, Conference Championship Week. We'll start to pick up the pace a little bit more now that we get down the stretch into December, January. We'll have NFL playoffs. NBA stuff's going to continue, the in-season tournament, all that great stuff. You're going to want to stick around, folks. Feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, all those great things. But, Andrew, when you look at this conference championship weekend, it feels a little bit weirder this year. We've had a mostly chalk year, but if just one or two things happen, all that chaos you usually talk about comes right back into it.
Yeah, I think there's still been a lot of chaos to start this year. Or throughout the year. You look at, if certain teams lose, you're going to have a bunch of one-loss teams. So I think the committee definitely has a tough choice on their hands, and I think they will after this weekend. But no, a very exciting weekend upcoming, and it's going to be a fun 2 days of championship weekend.
And as we get going here, starting with, as always, the number one team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs, taking on Alabama. Alabama's been stuck at 8 for a long time, but they're 11-1. They survived the scare of all scares in the Iron Bowl with their 27-24 win. Georgia played a lot closer than I think most people expected against Georgia Tech. But when Georgia plays Alabama, when you have two great coaches like Kirby Smart and Nick Saban, two amazing, talented teams, it's going to be a fun game in Atlanta.
Absolutely. It's going to be a game for the ages. You're going to have two teams come in here looking to a lot on the line. I really don't think Georgia's a lock to get in. I know it's crazy to say it, but like I said a few seconds ago, if Alabama wins this, you get a one-loss Georgia team. You're going to have one-loss Alabama, potentially a one-loss Texas, who Alabama lost to Texas, so they might have the edge over a bunch of one-loss teams because of that win. And then Alabama has the head-to-head over Georgia. So, Georgia's still got everything to play for this weekend. There's no playoffs locked in yet for them either. So, as crazy it is for a team that's won back-to-back championships and has 0 losses, I think that's the crazy part in this 4-playoff system. That 12-team playoff can't come fast enough because this has been the perfect year for it with all the craziness that could happen. But no, I think this is going to be a game that it's going to come down to the wire. It's going to be everything you want in a championship game, a coin flip type game. Well, in the end, I got to stick with the team that just continues to find ways to win throughout the last couple of years, and that's Georgia. I think in a neutral site game, or it's supposed to be a
Technical neutral site.
Technical neutral site, but obviously a little bit more favorite toward the Bulldogs here. So I think that their crowd's going to show out and be big time here. And I got to take Georgia in this game.
And Andrew, this is one of those, and I agree with you. I think this is still, despite everything Georgia's done this year, this is a must-win game for them. If you get the weird scenario, and we'll kind of talk about weird scenarios as we go through all these games, if Alabama finds a way to win, which they can, they still have the talent to, of course. It's just, can they continue to be consistent, especially with Jalen Milroe, with his decision-making? We saw that in the Iron Bowl a lot. The defense is mostly there for Alabama. They got burned on some stuff you wouldn't typically think an Alabama team does. A lot of read options Auburn ran. Georgia, though, it just feels like every time you start to look at, okay, Georgia had a bad game, here they come right back playing one of their best games of the season. You look at who's favored in this one. Moving down here, ESPN Bet added their own little thing, but that's still not the official Vegas line. Georgia 5.5-point favorites in this one. I would tend to lean that way for Georgia. I would think they get the cover there. I think the Dogs win, not comfortably, but still I think a 10-point win for Georgia sounds about right.
Okay, I'm not going to go that high. I think it goes 31-27 type range. I kind of go with where it says it opened up at 4. So that is telling, though, that it's already gone up 1.5 in Georgia's favor. But I'm going to lean towards Georgia in a very close game, and I guess I'll pick Bama against the spread.
Yeah, but it's going to be a fun one to see. I think this might be the game I'm most excited for, which is crazy to say considering the game we'll talk about Friday, the Friday night game with Oregon and Washington, but it's just going to be such a fun game. Anytime these two get together, it's going to be fun. The same cannot be said about the next game. Michigan plays Iowa. It's a Saturday night in Indianapolis. Michigan, number 2 in the country. They're 21.5-point favorites over Iowa, who they're 10-2. But I mean, you've heard this all year. They have a great defense. What is their offense, though?
Yeah, and I think this, to your point, to a game that a lot of people, not just you, is least excited about is I think this is where maybe, hopefully, with the change in conferences, real quick, can come with this, is they don't have set times. They have you pick the times based off the matchups. I mean, 7 o'clock for this game is kind of crazy when you have Georgia, Alabama not being a night game. You have OSU, Texas not being a night game. Well, I guess it is a night game because it's Friday. But even like Oregon, Washington, I mean, we'll see where they kind of end up. But like, to me, it's crazy that you have all those games, and your more excited matchups, your more, to me at least, viewership would come from some of those other games. So I don't know. I know because I know they usually stay strict to the conference times. I guess that's probably in the contract. That's why they do that. But to your point, the spread shows it. It's a 22-point spread. When it opened, now it looks like it's down to 21 according to that ESPN bet thing. But no, yeah, I think Michigan. I mean, I'd rather see them lose. I think a lot of people would, especially with what's going on there. I think it's a shame with still that not being fully sorted out that they're able to go. I think imagine 2 months from now if Michigan won the championship and then all the things about them is true, and now we're sitting here like, oh, we could have avoided that. But same, I mean, obviously you can say the same thing and the other way. But I think Iowa keeps it closer because of that defense. I mean, I don't think they were able to score close enough to win this game. I think Michigan still wins by double digits. I just think they're going to be too good overall. I think Iowa's able to keep it within 20. So I'll take Michigan in a 24 to, let's say 24-13 type game.
It seems like it's a little generous for Iowa's offense. Just to reiterate this, I don't think I've ever seen this before. Iowa's first half point total is an over-under of half a point. That is where Vegas is at with Iowa at this point. When you have 5 times this year, Iowa's had the record for the lowest ever over-under, and Iowa's hit the under every single time. It happened last week with 23 combined points and a 24.5 over-under against Nebraska. Iowa is going to be, I'm not going to say shut out. I think they will be able to get some points on the board, whether they come from their defense or their offense or even their special teams. I'll leave that up to.
I'll need one.
I'll leave that up to the Hawkeyes. But I'm going to say Michigan finds a way to comfortably win this game. It'll be a game that it'll look competitive for the first half, but everyone will know there's no way Iowa's coming back from this. I think Michigan finds a way to win by 20. I don't think they cover, but I think they get pretty close. Next one to talk about, one of the other monumental games, a top 5 battle, Oregon and Washington on Friday night in Las Vegas. Andrew, it's hard to think that this is it. This is the final Pac-12 game, and it's Oregon and Washington who are both going to be off to the Big Ten. You have Bo Nix, you have Michael Penix Jr. They've both been in the Heisman race. Both have been the Heisman front runner at some point this season. They had an amazing game in Seattle earlier this year that Oregon misses a field goal, or maybe that game goes to overtime. Everything has been setting up for this rematch, and you look at that spread, and Oregon's 9.5-point favorites in this one.
That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I don't understand how they could be that favorite in a game where these two teams are pretty close to even. Washington already won the early matchup between the two teams. You have 2 good quarterbacks, including one of the Heisman favorites in Penix. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. This was shocking when I saw this opening one come out. So I'm going to go Washington. I think Washington takes this game in a close battle. I think they're able to do things offensively. I think their defense is a little better than Oregon's. I think Oregon's offense is a little better than Washington's top to bottom. But I'm going to go Washington wins the close game here. So obviously that goes to say what I think in the spread as well. But what's crazy to me, too, is going back to that, as you mentioned, was usually, if it's high, it would come down a little bit. It's gone the opposite way. It's gone from 8 when it opened to 9 now. Like usually it would go 8-7 or 8-6. Like so, it's interesting to see the way this game's going. But I don't know how I feel about it being on Friday night. I don't know if it makes it more exciting because it's kind of I mean, I know we got that. We'll talk about the Liberty game too, but like in terms of the power conferences, I guess. I don't know if it makes it more intriguing. It's kind of got its own window, or if it's less intriguing being Friday. I know we both have things Friday night, so it'll be tough to fully watch it, but we'll be following it obviously. But so I don't know. I don't know how you feel about that. If it's more intriguing, a little less, that's on Friday.
See, I feel like some years you get the Pac-12 game like last year where it was, USC and Utah. That's a game I can kind of deal with more, having its own special window on Friday night. Everyone gets to see it. This one, though, I mean, it feels like it should be the primetime Saturday game.
Yeah.
This feels like the game that everyone should be watching. It's essentially a play-in game. Washington's 3, Oregon's 5. Whoever wins, you would think, is going to make the playoffs. I mean, unless something extremely weird happens. This should be the grand game that everyone looks to outside of Alabama and Georgia. That you look at this and go, okay, these are two amazing teams that get their opportunity to shine. And they still kind of do, being on Friday night. But it's college football. You play college football on Saturday. You leave high school to Friday. That's always how I've been. That being said, though, I think Oregon and Washington, ever since they met back in October, they've kind of switched places. Oregon has become the dominant team that's bulldozed through everybody. Yes, you could say, well, they played Arizona State, teams like that. You're supposed to beat those teams by 30 to 40. If you think you're that good to be a playoff team, Washington, they've kind of struggled a bit. Washington State last week in the rivalry, I'll give them a break for that. Oregon State, I'll give them a break for that. But when you play like an Arizona State and you get a 15-7 win that nobody saw because it's Pac-12 after dark, those are the kinds of games that I look at that I think Oregon finds a way to win this one. I'm not going to say they blow Washington out by any means. I think Oregon by 3, they get revenge, they turn the tide, and they get a spot in the playoffs. But the next one to look at, I mean, if you want to talk about intriguing storylines, this is definitely one of them. Florida State loses Jordan Travis 2 weeks ago in the game against North Alabama. They still go into the swamp. They're still a talented team, of course. They beat Florida 24-15. Louisville, on the other hand, had an opportunity to maybe be the long shot team if they could pull off a miracle. Well, then they go and lose to Kentucky. Their dream is dead there. They can still play spoiler and win the ACC and do all these other things. They have a lot to play for still, don't get me wrong. But Florida State is just trying to hold on for dear life. We'll see if they do. But the Noles, 2.5-point favorites in this one.
Yeah, which, I don't know, this game will go back and forth. It's tough, especially, I don't know if you've heard anything, because the backup left early last game, right, against Florida, so I don't know if you've heard anything, if he's going to start in this game or not. But
from what I would think, he'd be back in this one. He came back later on in the game.
So, I mean, it's an interesting call here. I think, I don't know how you feel. I know I'm all about the underdog story too, but I think a lot of college football fans need Louisville to win this because I don't know how many people are willing to watch a backup quarterback go against the likes of a Georgia and Alabama, potentially Michigan, obviously, depending on what happens this weekend. 'Cause that just screams blowout, I think, to a lot of people. And I know everyone in the Final Four would rather watch all close games. In the end, I don't know. I don't know how to go about this game. I mean, I think Louisville needs to control the game with the run game. Take the ball, kill the clock a lot. Don't even give Florida State a chance to get any opportunities with other people. Make them beat you. I'm going to take the Cardinals, I think, in a close battle. I think they're top to bottom now. With Travis being out, I think this is the game it really shows. You saw the Seminoles struggle against the Gators. I get it's a rivalry game. But, I mean, I think the Cardinals are better than the Gators team. So, I'm going to take the Cardinals here.
This is going to be one of those, I think it's going to make a lot of people unhappy. Because I think Florida State, despite everything going on, they still have a phenomenal offense. Yes, you're not dealing with Jordan Travis, of course. But when you still have Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson out there, when you still have Trey Benson at running back, I still think Florida State, when you compare their offense to Louisville's defense, I think it almost doesn't matter who you have in their quarterback. I still take Florida State to win that matchup. You still have guys like Jared Verse who can wreak havoc on defense. I think Florida State, it's not going to be pretty by any means. It's going to be an ugly game. I think Florida State holds on, gets a 7-point win over Louisville, and Florida State finds a way to punch that ticket in and makes a lot of people upset. You know, in their minds that we might be looking at like a Georgia-Florida State in a playoff or something like that. But the next one to get to, the Big 12 championship game. Going to guarantee you right now, someone wearing orange is going to be very happy about whoever wins this one. Oklahoma State taking on Texas. Texas 15.5-point favorites against an Oklahoma State team that we're not going to know which OSU team we get until that game starts, Andrew.
No, we're not even know which OSU team we get till the third quarter at this
Yeah.
rate, the way they play Houston and BYU. But no, you can't do that against this Texas team. You can't come out slow, which we've seen the last few weeks from this OSU team. But I'd also say that about the Eagles. But you know what? They started slow and came back and beat the Bills and Chiefs. So maybe that's just a recipe for my teams to do, is give me heart attacks in the first half and then put it all out there in the second half. But now, on a serious note, no, you can't start like that. You're not going to come back like that on this Texas team like you have in the last couple weeks. Obviously, OSU's recipe to success is pretty easy. Give the ball to Gordon. He'll take care of the rest. I think Texas is a more well-rounded team, top to bottom. I think they're going to give OSU problems in certain spots. I think, obviously, again, that's the key for OSU is take advantage of what you got, and that's the run game. You have the ability to control the clock. You have the ability to control the game through the ground because you have to. And if you don't, I think it's going to come back and hurt. And I think in this game, I think OSU is going to be able to cover it. I don't see it being a multi-touchdown difference. But, you know, I tell you, I like to keep it real. I mean, obviously, I want Oklahoma State to win. But, I mean, I think I got to lean Texas in this game. I think, again, it's going to be a close back-and-forth battle, but I think Texas is just more well-rounded. Their slow starts are still in my head, and, again, I don't think you can do that against this Texas team. And I always say until I'm proven otherwise, and OSU has to do that. And, I mean, you've seen it hurt them. You've seen it in the losses this season. I mean, a lot of that has been due to slow starts. And you're playing catch-up, and you close the game. Well, I can't remember what the final score was, but I remember against Iowa State, you went down early, you were playing catch-up, you made it close in the end. But, again, ultimately, it's that slow start that hurt you in that game. So I think that continues in this game. Luckily, though, I mean, you saw the weather last week. You don't have to deal with that at AT&T Stadium. So hopefully yeah, it's gonna be a clean, it's gonna be a fun football game, but ultimately Texas is able to win their last Big 12 championship here.
This is one that, you know, as an OU fan, this is your worst nightmare. This is Oklahoma State and Texas, your two rivals playing each other. But at the same time, there are just so many fun storylines in this one. But the main matchup to me, and you mentioned it, Andrew, and I agree with you, it's going to be Ollie Gordon versus the Texas' rushing defense. That D-line of Texas has been stout this year. They've made big plays whenever they absolutely have to get a stop on someone, but I don't think they've seen a running back like Ollie Gordon this year. You don't see many guys as talented as he is. That is going to be the fun battle because on the other side, OSU's secondary versus Texas's receiver core, that is not going to be fun for Oklahoma State. Worthy and Mitchell are absolutely ridiculous to cover. You throw in Sanders as a tight end, and it's just absolutely insane to try to deal with. I think Texas, if they can just get off to a quick start, that's been one of the few things Texas has dealt with at times. Sometimes they start slow, sometimes they'll start fast, and then they'll start to slow things down in the fourth quarter. We saw that where it nearly bit them against TCU and Kansas State. If we get the Texas we saw last week, where they come out, immediately blow Texas Tech out of the water, and that game was over pretty quick, I could see things turning bad into a Texas wins by multiple scores, maybe even gets up to 20, worst case scenario for OSU. But if the OSU I've seen the last 2 weeks shows up, this is somehow going to be a game going into the fourth quarter, and a lot of people might turn it off at halftime, get that notification that, what do you mean it's a one-possession game with 5 minutes left? And they watch Oklahoma State find a way to try to win, but I don't think they can. I think Texas is just too talented of a team. I don't think Ollie Gordon can carry him to victory in this one. It'll be a fun game, but I don't think OSU is going to get the win.
So what you're saying is, since Texas starts slow too, it's going to be 7-7 at the end of the third, and the final score is going to be like 38-35 somehow.
That could happen. That very well could happen. I mean, we saw that in OU's final game where it was just seemingly normal, then it turned into a 69-45 game. I'm sure Texas fans want nothing near what OU did in their final Big 12 game, but I think Texas gets to celebrate, go off to the SEC with one final Big 12 championship, and then they have to sit and wait and hope that mainly Florida State gets beat, because I think that's the main key for Texas looking at it. But as we make our way down to the lower conferences, out of the Power 5 down to the Group of 5, SMU and Tulane. Interesting one here. SMU not going to have their starting quarterback in this with Preston Stone. He is out for the year. Tulane's at home. They're 3.5-point favorites. Tulane trying to get back to another New Year's Six Bowl. If they win, they'll more than likely make it.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a fun game. I mean, we'll see. Obviously, like you said, with Stone being out, we'll see what kind of points SMU is able to put on the board. I think before we would have said it, we would have screamed shootout probably. I mean, how would that matchup predictor though? I mean, very heavy to SMU,
Yeah, it is.
especially with the backup quarterback being in. But no, I think it's gonna be a back and forth type game. I think both teams offer some good things. I'd be, I don't know. I guess if Liberty stays undefeated, do you think Tulane is the team that gets that year? I mean, we can talk about that later, but I don't know. It'll be an interesting case. I'm gonna go the Green Wave here. I think they're able to get the job done. I think they win by a touchdown here over the Mustangs.
And that's where I'm at. I think Tulane being at home at Yeoman, that's a place they've gotten to where they don't lose often there. Their only loss this year is to a great Ole Miss team. Tulane's been a fun team to watch. I know it's kind of weird to think about. Everyone remembers the Cotton Bowl from last year. They brought some people back from that. They've been continuing to still play an exciting brand of football. And I think Tulane shows that once again. They'll have the 3 o'clock. They're going head-to-head with the SEC Championship. But, folks, if you want to watch something a little bit different, feel free to flip over to ABC every once in a while to see what Tulane and SMU are up to. But I think Tulane gets the job done. And to add to your point, Andrew, of the question, I think you give Tulane the nod over Liberty. Even though Tulane has that one loss, considering it was a day where you didn't have Michael Pratt at quarterback, and you still played Ole Miss close for 3.5 quarters. Granted, it was at home, but I don't know how much that makes a difference in a Power 5 group of 5 when you have Ole Miss fans trying to take the stadium over. I think you give it to Tulane. I really do.
Why not both?
You could. I mean, if you wanted to, you could give it to both. But that's the other one here, the Friday night game as well. New Mexico State taking on Liberty. Liberty, of course, is undefeated, number 24 in the country. New Mexico State, though. New Mexico State 10-3. That added games because they did the fun Hawaii rule, where if you play them earlier in the year, you get to add the extra game. I believe it's if you go to Hawaii, just to incentivize that travel. But New Mexico State, I mean, they're another story we don't really talk about a whole lot, but getting to 10 wins from where they usually are, it's hard to think. It was, I want to say, 5, 6, 7 years ago. They made their first bowl game in 60 years. Jerry Kill's done a wonderful job there at New Mexico State. Doesn't help that I technically have a relative who plays for them as well, so I'm a little biased towards the Aggies, just a little bit, but we'll see what they do playing Liberty. The Flames are 11-point favorites.
Yeah, we'll see what they're able to do in this game. Obviously, Liberty going for the undefeated season, going for hopefully a New Year's Six bowl game if they're able to complete this undefeated season. And I think they'll be able to get the job done. I think the Flames are able to come here on Friday night. I think, again, another weird Friday night game. We'll see how that impacts kind of the start of this game, being technically a day short there of a normal Saturday. So we'll see what if that affects either one of these teams. But in the end, yeah, Liberty's able to continue their undefeated season and see what they can do the following week in their bowl game or following game.
And that's where I'm at. I think Liberty gets the job done. As much as I'd like to see New Mexico State win just to kind of complete that underdog story, I don't think they can do it. Liberty's a top 5 offense in football. They're able to run the ball as well as anybody. This is a Liberty team that, once again, if you've not seen them at all this year, Friday night's a good time to watch them. They'll have that hour before Washington and Oregon. But Liberty's just too good. They'll get to that undefeated season, keep it going at 13-0, and try to get it to 14 in a bowl game. But that will wrap it up for the conference championship games. Andrew, if you want to talk playoff scenarios just for a few minutes here, because I think that's where everyone is. We'll have Saturday, of course, and then big selection Sunday. We'll probably come up here and do a video about that once those rankings come out. I think they come out at, I want to say noon our time or 11 a.m. or I don't know, somewhere midday Sunday. Let's just leave it at that. But you look at it, and I think it's pretty simple. If, Oregon, Washington, someone's going to get in from that. Georgia, Alabama, I think Georgia has to win. Michigan, Iowa, Michigan needs to win that game. The main one's going to be Louisville, Florida State. I think that's kind of the key breaker if you look at it, if you're Texas or even Ohio State or Alabama trying to sneak their way back in. Obviously, you've got to take care of business if you're in Alabama or Texas. But that one, I think, is the key one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I'm a little different than you in that sense. I think there's a lot going on here. I think I think we're all surprised. The only one will be absolutely surprised if someone wins is Iowa. No offense to the Hawkeyes, but I think that's almost the one you're putting to the side. So I think Michigan, and I truly believe this when I say this, I think Michigan is the only lock just because I don't see them losing.
Yeah.
But to me, if Oregon won this Washington game, right, I get it. They're Pac-12 champions. But we've seen in the past championships don't matter in terms of to the committee.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be stuck with a one-loss Georgia, one-loss Alabama, one-loss Washington, one-loss Oregon, and how do you – I don't know. I could see them leaving Oregon and Washington out. I could see them going Michigan. Let's say Florida State wins. I could see them going Michigan, Florida State, Georgia, Alabama. I could see it. Especially because your argument is both sides. Because if you say, okay, who's Oregon's lost to? It's Washington. Who's Washington? It's Oregon. 2 top 5 teams. But then you're going to say the same thing about Georgia and Alabama. And Georgia won their, I guess you can say, division.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you're almost saying the same thing because Washington won the regular season, but so did Georgia. So now you kind of have the same argument for Georgia. So I think there's actually it's full craziness if Georgia loses, because I think a bunch of and obviously you have Texas, a Big 12 champion, who would be one loss as well.
Yeah.
So then who do you take? Do you take a one-loss Big 12 champion, or do you take a one-loss Pac-12 champion?
Yeah.
So I mean, again, it's full crazy outside Michigan. I really don't think, and how crazy would that be if Iowa does somehow pull off the amazing upset, and now you got one-loss Michigan in there.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, let's not forget, I think the team that's going to be interesting, too, if you get all these one-loss teams, would be an Ohio State, obviously, who didn't win. Well, they didn't win the regular season, so how do they factor into some of these one-loss teams? Because their one loss is to, if Georgia was to lose, the number 1 team, if not number 2 team. So I think it's full madness. Like I'm glad I'm not on the committee Sunday. Let's just say that. That's number 1. Number 2, I'll say it again. This year would have been the perfect season for the 12 playoff team to start, because I do think, and again, it's nothing against any team, but like I think Oregon, Washington, and you could see this weekend if they split the head-to-head overall in the series or season. I think they're basically a coin flip. I mean, Texas is probably just as good as both those teams. Like these teams. And I know we talk about Georgia. They've been undefeated for the last, 3 years almost? I mean, like you said when we were covering that game, they've played a lot of games close. So are they really as powerful as some of the others? I mean, I think you could make a case for them in Michigan and Alabama all being like, I think these teams are truly pretty close. And, I really wish it was a 12-team playoff this year.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at. If we could have just made an exception, but like, all right, we've got too much going on, just make it a 12-team. We already have the stats and know what it would be if it was a 12-team playoff. But to me, I agree with you. I think Michigan-Iowa is really the only lock. If Iowa does find a way to win that game, 6-3 or however they would find a way to win it, I think Pandora's box gets opened, and then anything's really possible at that rate.
Well, plus because, I mean, we talk about quote-unquote good losses and tough losses. Everyone jokes about Iowa. Like, no one – we all sit here. So, like, if Michigan hypothetically did lose that game, you could argue, and I actually really don't think many people would argue, out of all these one-loss teams, that Iowa's probably the worst loss.
Yeah, Iowa would instantly become the worst.
So how far does Michigan drop then in that case? Like, are you taking a one-loss Pac-12 Oregon, one-loss Washington, one-loss Georgia, Alabama? Are they all better than a one-loss Michigan to Iowa?
Yeah.
Like, that's what's crazy. Like, like hypothetically, if you then you're going to compare losses. I mean, because you'd probably argue – I know you would because you're a Sooner fan, but, I mean, I'm just kidding. Most people would argue OU's probably better than Iowa.
Yeah.
So you could even argue Texas's loss is, quote-unquote, a better loss than Michigan's loss.
Yeah, and see, the one that intrigues me, the scenario I've kind of heard some people throw around, what if, say, Michigan takes care of business, Washington, Oregon, it matters, but I guess not as much in this certain scenario. The main thing would be if Florida State wins, but Alabama beats Georgia. So you'd have an undefeated Michigan, an undefeated Florida State. You would have, let's just say, an undefeated Washington there. So you have 3 undefeateds. Texas wins, but Alabama beats Georgia. Who do you go with between one-loss Georgia, one-loss Georgia, one-loss Bama, and one-loss Texas? Who do you take for that 4th spot? Like, that's one of those. Georgia, they're 2-time national champions. They've played well all season. Their only losses to Alabama, a team we all know as well, but Texas beat Alabama. Texas and Alabama would both be conference champions. But still, in my mind, it wouldn't shock me if at that point in Alabama jumped Texas because of the win over Georgia, as crazy as that sounds. I could see the committee doing that.
Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, and I guess I don't know. I personally would still lean Georgia. I know as crazy as that sounds. I think I don't know. And as I said out loud, it's like I kind of take that back. But like to me, Georgia would beat Texas. So I mean, I think. Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. My vote, I think I lean towards Georgia because I think overall they're the better team. And with them all three not playing each other, and then the two splitting head to head, meaning Alabama beat Georgia, Texas beat Alabama, I then look at eye test wise, maybe, I mean, I haven't dove into the numbers, so I don't know who's overall better strength of schedule and all that, who's averaging more left and right. But I think eye test to me, the Georgia's the better of the three. And I think since you don't have a clear head-to-head favorite, I think you have to, or not have to, sorry. I think I would lean Georgia.
Yeah, and see, I would theoretically lean Texas in that because Texas beat Alabama, who beat Georgia. To me, that makes the most sense, but that's not the only factor that determines everything. Like you mentioned, the eye test, strength of record, game control, all those other things get factored, and people are going to look at it and say, well, the SEC has a better, top to bottom than the Big 12, whether if that's true or not. That's just kind of the name recognition the SEC has. Like you said earlier, I don't want to be on the committee this Sunday. That sounds like a horrible decision to have to make because somebody is going to be mad they get left out. That is absolutely going to be there. The fact that we're getting a 12-team playoff next year is great. I just wish we would have started with that because that would have made for a lot more fun than what we've had to deal with in the past.
1,000%. Like it could not have been a better year for it to start this year. Like I don't know how many years you get like this. And I know obviously we had 5 or 6 in the past, like 1 or 2 left out, but like this year you truly could have 3 or 4 left out that are going to be unhappy.
You really could. I mean, it's going to be absolutely crazy to see what happens on Sunday. But folks, as always, feel free to come back for that video Sunday because I'm sure it's going to be confusing or head-scratching or something other, one or the other at least, depending on what ends up happening. But, folks, until next time, like I said earlier, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below. Tell us your predictions, what you think will happen in the college football playoff whenever we get to that madness that will be Selection Sunday. But until next time, have a good one, everybody.